Welcome back everybody to the Hard4Games channel. I am your host Tony, and today, courtesy of developer Jeff, we have two PlayStation 3 controller prototypes. Two of what seems like 5 million revisions that they actually went through, because he's shown me pictures of his collection, which you can see for yourself on Twitter, and Sony just went through so many different versions of the DualShock 3 before landing on what they actually utilized for the retail release of the PlayStation 3. So, I hope that you all enjoy taking a look at these two things. We're going to compare them to the retail, compare them to the DualShock 2, i.e. the PlayStation 2 controller, and let's get started. Alright, so here's a quick reminder what the retail version of the PlayStation 3 controller looks like, in case you've been so deep into the PlayStation 4, almost PlayStation 5's life cycle that you've forgotten what it looks like. Here it is. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into the earliest prototype that we have right here, and you can already tell looks very different and much more bulky in comparison to the retail version. It has this whole bridge up here for starters. Now, taking a look at the front side here, you can tell some differences. You have an analog button on this one, which is much more akin to the PlayStation 2 DualShock 2 controller. And obviously they lost that button with the retail PlayStation 3 controller. Jumping to the reverse side here, you can see some differences. Obviously, the prototype version doesn't have the DualShock 3 or the 6-axis branding. It doesn't have the USB symbol, and it also doesn't have the indicator lights showing you which controller it's functioning as, player 1, 2, 3, or 4. Obviously, a much more simple design, and of course, much more indicative of the DualShock 2, where it's plugged in via a controller, and so you just kind of know what player it is, versus wireless, where it can get a little bit more mixed up. So they hadn't gotten around yet to doing the indicator lights. And here is some tape here. I'm assuming they were doing some testing with the innards of it and kind of taped it over. I'm not going to open that up today because I don't want to mess with Jeff's stuff. At least not too much. Now, I found this particularly interesting. You can see here with the L and R triggers, there's like this bridge here, right? So you get this, and you also have this, right? And so it's actually literally butting up against plastic, so it doesn't really have that tense DualShock 3 trigger feel that the retail version has. It's just sort of very plasticky, sort of cheap feeling. And, again, with the PlayStation 2 controller, and again, I got this at a garage sale, so I was like, I've only half cleaned it, it's kind of nasty right now. You get kind of the same thing. It's sort of plasticky trigger feeling. There's this bridge here, right? And it doesn't really have that sort of tense spring that you get with the retail version. So again, retail version, it cuts off that bridge right here, so you have this sort of pressure sensitivity and sort of a more tense, spring-loaded sort of feel here. Less plasticky, it's harder to do that. Versus with this, much easier, and it's bridged over here. Actually, pretty far out, too. It's about the same as the DualShock 2. I guess with the DualShock 2, this comes in a deeper arch than this one does. This one's just kind of thicker overall. There's a similar thing going on here with your L3 and R3, so very easy to press, sort of plasticky sounding. This isn't as noisy, it's less plasticky sounding. It's not hard to press, but it's harder to press. And again, this is more similar to the DualShock 2. Than it is the DualShock 3. So I like this because it's sort of this true in-between. between the two DualShocks. I think it's pretty neat. And just for reference, this is a reference tool prototype pad. The model number is ALPS MSU REV3 M3. So let's go ahead and jump to the next prototype. Now, as you can see here, this definitely more so has the look of the DualShock 3, but it hasn't quite nailed the feel of the DualShock 3. So flipping it over here, you can see the model number is CBEH-1019.
This device has not been authorized as required by the rules of the Federal Communications Commission, blah, 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 blah,
not offered for sale, can't be sold, etc., etc., etc. This is a pretty standard warning for a lot of prototype-y sort of stuff. So as you can see here, it's a lot less thick. They thinned it down quite a bit, and comparing it to the retail, like I mentioned, it's pretty similar. Taking a look at the back here, you can see that we now have the indicator lights, but not quite all the branding just yet. We have the 6-axis, which is located a little further north than the retail version, but we don't have the DualShock 3 branding just yet. Also, this seems to be a little bit thicker than the actual retail version of the controller. Jumping to the side here, you can see that we've lost a lot of that bridge, and you have a little bit more of that tension feel, but not 100% of what we get on the retail version. Maybe it's just me. I feel like the retail controller still feels a little bit more tense with the triggers. Like this is a lot closer, but not quite there. Although that could just be me. However, the L3 and R3 definitely are quite different. You still kind of have that quick, twitchy click. More plasticky sound, whereas the retail version is harder to press. You notice that sometimes when I try to press it, I actually, like, end up moving in a specific direction, because you have to be more specific and press to the center with this thing, whereas this is just easier. It's just much more easy to engage this particular button, which again is more similar to the DualShock 2. Thank you everybody for watching again. I thought that was sort of an interesting expose on the history of the DualShock 3, how Sony decided to get from point A to point B, or more accurately, because they had so many revisions, point A to point Z, and kind of all the tiny little revisions along the way. I should mention, which I didn't mention before, that this guy, the older reference tool prototype pad, is so early and so old that it will not sync to a retail PlayStation 3. It just cannot do that handshake, whereas the later prototype that I showcased will actually connect to a PlayStation 3 because it is far enough along in development that they can understand each other. So big thank you to developer Jeff again for lending these to us. You can check him out on Twitter, and he pretty regularly posts his prototype and dev collection. It's really interesting because he has just a plethora, just a treasure trove of stuff in his hands that he likes to share with everybody. So again, big thank you, sir. For everybody else, thank you so much for watching, subscribing, ringing that bell, all that good stuff, and we will see you all next time.
Hard4Games. They're Hard4Games. Games are hard.